Hey everybody! I'm here today to show you and tell you how to prune a fruit tree properly. This will be a simple tutorial, so let's get right into the video. I'll be going over some general tips, tricks, and tutorial steps for pruning fruit trees properly, no matter which fruit tree you're dealing with. So these are things that will apply to all fruit trees. There are definitely things that are specific for every type of fruit tree, but these are just general things. I'm going to get behind the camera so I can sort of give you a better view of what I'm talking about. So first and foremost is you have to know when to prune the fruit tree. Ideally, with all fruit trees, you want to prune them during a time when they're not budding, when they're not blooming, when they're not flowering, okay? So if your tree is like this tree, which is a cherry tree right here, this blooms and flowers in sort of the middle of summer where I live, okay? So you want to prune something like this early spring or late fall. That's when you would prune this, in the early spring or in the late fall, simply because that's when it's not blooming or budding. I would never prune this in the middle of summer because that's when it's getting its nutrients and using them to produce fruit, okay? So as a rule of thumb, prune the tree whenever it is not actually blooming, and also don't prune a fruit tree at all within the first few years of planting it. You should just let it grow, let it get its roots down, let it get its grounding, and then you can start pruning it, okay? Now, the second thing is you want to prune off any branches that are must-haves or must-nots, I should say. So in this case right here, we are actually on a porch, and we don't like any fruit dropping on the porch, so I always sort of prune off all of the cherry branches that are sort of on top of the porch. That might not be in the best interest of the fruit and getting the best cherries, but I don't want to be cleaning up cherries every day. So for instance, I'll just give you an example right now. This branch right here is actually on the porch right now. It's overhanging the porch, meaning there's going to be cherries on the porch. So what I would do is I would get just a pair of pruning scissors like this, or something bigger, which I'll show you in a moment, and I would prune off this. Now this actually is already broken off, so the leaves are actually dying on there, but I would prune that off. And just a simple little snip right there, and that allows me to make sure that that's not falling on the porch. Now, like I said, you have to do the things that make sense for you. Obviously, there's actually a roof right behind me, so I don't want any of these branches growing on the roof. So if they get too close to the roof or the eaves troughs, then I'm going to trim them off. Okay, so the first step is to trim off anything that just doesn't make sense for you as a homeowner, as the owner of the fruit tree, and so forth, okay? Next, you have to think about the actual height of the tree. Now, in this case, this cherry tree has not been properly pruned in many years. It has not been properly pruned in a long time. So it's grown to be really, really tall, okay? And I know cherry trees are supposed to be big, but if you take a look up there, I don't know if you're gonna be able to see this. I'll try and zooming in a little bit, but all of the best cherries are all at the top, which are far out of reach. Even with my tallest ladder and my best climbing skills, I just can't get them, okay? So you want to keep your fruit tree nice and trimmed, nice and relatively medium size, small to medium size. So what I would do when I get the appropriate tools is I'm going to go and I'm going to trim off all of the top of that, the canopy of that. And I'll tell you why. The top is going to get the most sun, the most water, the most rain. So it's gonna bloom the best fruit, okay? And you want that fruit to be accessible to you. So you want to be able to grab that fruit even with the ladder, right? So you want it to be low enough. So if I trim off all of this top, then that means I can get all of the nice ripe fruit over here. So keep your tree at a relatively small to medium size and make sure it's accessible to you. I'll give you an example. There's another fruit tree. Let's just get the camera down over there. So that's a fruit tree that when it produces fruit, which hopefully it will, it'll all be easy to pick, right? That's enough fruit, you know, that I can just walk up to it, grab the fruit off of the tree. It's nice and simple. That's a good sized fruit tree. Obviously much younger and different kind of fruit tree, so it's not meant to grow as big. Even this one over here is still at a relatively good size in terms of that's like as tall as it gets, which I can access with a ladder. So make sure it doesn't get too big. Also, if it gets too big, the sun and the water and the rain and all of the nutrients are not going to be sufficient to allow it to produce good fruit. So you're going to get very unripened fruit or just not much fruit at all. So make sure you trim off the top to your liking to make it, you know, only big enough. Next, what you want to do is you want to trim off these smaller branches. So like when you're ready to trim the tree, when you're just going about trimming it, you want to trim off all the smaller branches. What you don't want to do is, for the most part, is cut off a branch like that one over there, because that's a nice large branch. That's going to feed all the nutrients to the other branches in the tree. You don't want to cut off anything like this one over here, anything big. What you do want to cut off, let's try and get into the zone right here. What you do want to cut off are lots of small branches. So anything that like branches off, like anything any of these little small branches, you do want to trim those, because those will grow back, and they'll grow back with new fruit. You want the large branches like this one to continue growing bigger, and the small branches, if you trim them off, they're going to grow back. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to point the camera over here, okay? Another thing you can use, let me just get the screen so I can see myself, is something like this, which is just a pole tree trimmer, otherwise known as a pole branch cutter. It just is a simple device. It has a rope. It allows you to cut branches that are hard to reach. So for instance, if I wanted to cut this branch right here that's hard to reach, I could use my pole tree trimmer. I'm not sure if this is on camera. Yes, it is. I could use my pole tree trimmer to wrap it around, and I could just simply cut it off like that. Now this is an older one that is not that sharp, so it takes a little bit more effort, but it's something simple that if you're planning on pruning fruit trees, there we go, if you're planning on pruning fruit trees for a while, you can get yourself one of those, okay? As you can see, this is an example, right? So this is an example right here. This branch does not have any cherries on it. The cherries have already fallen off. So all of the blooming has already happened. The cherries have fallen off, so there's nothing left for this branch to produce, okay? It's a relatively small branch. I trimmed it off. Next year, what's gonna happen is a new branch, maybe a little bit thinner than this, will grow back, and where this one was, or very close to it, because that's how the nutrients in the tree work, and it's going to produce even better fruit, because the nutrients will feed that bigger branch that I left on there, and then that bigger branch will have more nutrients to provide to the smaller branch, similar to the one that I just cut off, and it's going to produce better fruit. Okay, so basically what you want to do is make sure you don't trim the tree within the first few years of planting it. You trim it at the appropriate time when it's not blooming. You trim it, you know, with all of the things that you just don't want, like the things that don't work for you. So like for me, anything that grows over here over the porch, I trim off immediately without even, like, with no questions asked. And you want to make sure that you trim it to be relatively small to medium size, and make sure that you can access the fruit at the top of the tree, because that's going to be the best fruit earlier on. And if you do a good job, then what's going to happen is, like, this will produce fruit that's really ripe over there first, then later on these will ripen, and then later on these will ripen. So you get 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, depending on how big the tree is, different sessions of picking fruit where it's going to be ripe. So that's basically it. That is how to trim a fruit tree. It's been a simple tutorial on how to trim a fruit tree properly. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think down below as a comment. And of course, oh, before I forget, you know what, I was doing my outro there, but hopefully you're still around. Like, you should not really be using a chainsaw to trim a fruit tree, because you shouldn't be trimming any branches that are thick enough to need a chainsaw. So that's also, like, I see people using a chainsaw to trim their fruit trees, and it's just not recommended, because you shouldn't be trimming these thick branches. So, and the thinner ones, you could probably use pruning scissors, or just, you know, even bigger pruning scissors to do them. So that's just a quick side note. Don't really be using a chainsaw to trim your fruit tree. And that's it, once again, with my outro. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think down below as a comment. And of course, be sure to subscribe for more great videos just like this one. And that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching.